conveners of the program are on immediately after us, so if I don't get started now, well, I presume the conveners won't invite me back again. So bear with me, and I might be able to come back. Now I'm Greg Earle. I have been on the advisory board of the Indonesia project. I'm very humbled to be invited up here. I first came to this conference about 30 years ago when I was a part-time student at ANU. So looking around the crowd yesterday and again today, I figure there's 30 years worth of Indonesia updates probably ahead of us. So that's a really good thing to see. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people. I would like to acknowledge the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay my respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal people, past and present. Now, yesterday we had mathematical models about globalisation, and we had a 400-year perspective of globalisation in Indonesia. But today, we're really getting down to the little people, the real human face of globalisation, a very different perspective, but a very important one if the big picture issues we talked about yesterday are going to really be managed or have a productive outcome. So we have here today Hidayah from Migrant Care, and Dominggus Elcid from the Institute of Resource Governance and Social Change. El, I might note, is the only other journalist I see that's slipped onto the program apart from me, so I'm glad he's up here today and I'm doing this session. So I guess without any further announcements, all the biographies are all in the program. So Anis, would you like to speak, please?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mas Aco, for inviting me to be here to present in Indonesia Update 2017. This morning, I will talking about what humans face in globalization, quite different with what we discussed yesterday. I will share with all of you regarding with how the Indonesian migrant workers, mostly women, facing the situation abroad. But I will also share with all of you how our effort to ensuring the safe migration through our small initiative starting from the village. We call DESBUMI. So Desa Peduli Buruh Migran, Village for Migrant Workers Protection. The feminization of migration actually, whereas so many female migrant workers are ever increasing and becoming more vulnerable to gender-based violence. Mostly 7 million Indonesian migrant workers, 85% are women and work as migrant domestic workers in many several countries. That in that country there are no policies on migrant domestic workers. Until now, we still have 212 Indonesian migrant workers facing death penalty abroad. In Malaysia, in Saudi, in Singapore, in China, and in Qatar. We also still have 65,000 children of migrant workers in Sabah, Malaysia, have no access for education because they are stateless, undocumented migrant workers. Last year, under our documentation, 10,666 Indonesian migrant workers being reported to be victims of trafficking, and only 194 finished under the trial process. And only individual one, middleman, being punished, being jailed, no one of them from the recruitment agencies. And the legal framework for labor migration in Indonesia does not effectively protect migrant workers. In fact, it is exploitative toward women. High-cost migration scheme and a monopoly by private sector. Under the research of World Bank in 2013, Indonesia is the highest one, the cost structure of migration, with average $2,700. And the second one is Philippines with the average $1,400. And the scheme of migration that we have centralized and gender blind. Also continuing the impunity and the migration scheme actually nearly with the practice of trafficking and slavery. Under the report of Global Slavery Index, what the situation of Indonesia is increased by more than 300% of the number with the victim of modern slavery around the world. And Indonesia in 2014 being top 10 rank with the citizen in the slavery situation. But on the other side, the total remittance in 2006 of Indonesian migrant workers about $8,860 billion. And one of the common situation, I think, is the corruption. There are no transparency of the management of migration and the protection of them. This is our labor minister climbing to monitor the recruitment agencies in Jakarta. We are reported that so many Indonesian migrant workers isolated in the dormitory house of recruitment agency. So we call that protection is understood partially in ad hoc manner, case-by-case approach. It is often too reactive or even late. Also, migrant workers, I think since New Order and until now, still treated as commodity. So many adventure in receiving countries, we saw like that. Like fire your Indonesian maid. This is the adventure of robot in Malaysia, the cleaner. Indonesian maid no on sale, Japanese maid, how the price, and so on. I think we're familiar with this tweet from Fahri Hamzah, the politician from PKS, how does not respected with migrant workers. He said, anak bangsa mengemis menjadi babu di negeri orang. It's very not respect how to call Indonesian domestic workers with babu. Yeah. And how the foreign policy and our diplomacy to protect Indonesian migrant workers. When King Saudi visited Indonesia last March, there are 11 things signing between two countries, and migrant workers not on the list. In the fact, we have 1 million Indonesian migrant domestic workers there with the undecent work condition. Still working 18 hours per day, no access for communication, in abusive, unpaid, and so on. So why migrant care is part of civil society organization in cooperating with local government, especially village government, starting the initiative from village. Why we starting from village? Because village is the first area of recruitment, recruiting people by middlemen. There are a lack of commitment, no data on migrant workers. Village apparatus also part of the broker. And the potential victim, poorness, limited education, limited information, limited employment access, mostly women drop out from school, also facing domestic violence, divorce. So the circle of feminization migration actually, circle of violence by women. they facing domestic violence, divorce, child marriage, and then going abroad, working abroad also still facing abusive, and then going back to Indonesia, most of their husband also married again. What we call as momentum in this initiative, since 2014 we have village law. It's very important for us because since New Order, the village is only did the administrative thing. Under the village law, a village have the new mandate how to improve the welfare of their citizen. We have also in 2012 ratification of International Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers and their families. Also the document of Sustainable Development Goals, the decent work goals, the justice. The other thing also, the obligation of state presence under the Nawacita document is very clear actually, how the Indonesian government should be present to protect Indonesian citizen abroad. Village law as a basis, every year now village supported by the Dana Desa among 1 miliar rupiah. So how to utilize this village fund also to provide services for migrant workers from the village level. Also to convenience and availability and accuracy of access of information starting from the village. And one thing, the democratization of the village governance. Many women know, coming to the village office, discussing with the authority in the village, how to ensure that the agenda of migrant workers being part of the village planning of developing yearly. Also the demanding of the participation of society. In Indonesia, the ratification of Migrant Workers Convention is a big progress because this finally ratified after 20 years process. Ratification of International Migrant Workers Convention being agenda of National Plan of Human Rights in 3 period. Also in the National Legislation Program 2 period. So very long process. And ratification for us is foundation to uphold the rights of migrant workers, being basis for shifting the paradigm from commodity to respecting of human rights. Also very important for us, the government should have always been there. The government has not always been available to protect migrant workers. The role supposed to play are taken over by private agencies that their own profit interests are priority. In many ways, government gets more involved with private agencies and even conspires with them than how to do partnership and participation with civil society organization. And the legislative bodies are supposed to create a policy to protect migrant workers. But the revision of the law, which has been enacted for 7 years, starting from 2010, but not finished until now yet. As you know, this law, actually, the drafter of the law is the 3 people, 3 musketeers we call, who are owner of the recruitment agencies. The big one, and they are member of the political party, Bendahara Partai Golkar in the New Order, and until now still member of parliament. They are the owner of PT Megah Buana, PT El Karim, and PT Andromeda. So we can imagine how this matter is big business and relating with political and power relation. Why DESBUMI that I mentioned before, the potential thing is a village is really close with the society, the information source are accurate, Also, they have village fund. And the challenge, of course, the hegemony of the private agencies to exploit the potential corruption, the capacity of village apparatus, the lack of public awareness of their rights, and the sustainability. But there are also an opportunity how to change the paradigm of the village is a public service of the transformation role. The role that the village plays will undermine the private agencies who have been more involved in recruiting migrant workers. So like village as a lapak for trafficking in the matter. The strategic role of the local government, especially village, in protecting migrant workers. As a matter of the fact, local government actually is one of the key pillars in placing and protecting migrant workers. Migrant workers usually coming from village. The decentralization of migrant workers' placement should be established to allow regional control, including village concerning their society. So not only the government of the village, but also all elements of the village caring about this issue, about the migrant workers. Also to avoid the accumulation of migrant workers in Jakarta, 80% of recruitment agencies based in Jakarta and big cities around Indonesia. So the middlemen recruiting people, then bringing them to the Jakarta and big cities. So in many cases, they isolated even before going abroad. So why the minister climbing the wall? There are so many local resources that should be optimized, like hospital, labor office, airport, immigration, training center. Hospital is very important for us, RSUD, because until now, the medical checkup being business of the recruitment agencies, many cases also happen. So under the insurance of migrant workers transformed to be BPJS, it's good news for us how to transform many things, including the health access for migrant workers. This is our finding research. Being background, how DESBUMI starting. Our research in East Flores and Lembata regencies in Nusa Tenggara Timur, NTT. East Flores and Lembata regencies are two regencies of migrant workers base. However, these regencies have not seen regulation concerning the protection of migrant workers. In regard to the data collection, for example, the labor office in Lembata regency only record 10 migrant workers in 2012, the year that we did the research. In the meantime, the labor office in East Flores record only 12 migrant workers who also registered in 2012. The data is indeed counterproductive with the amount of the remittance received by two regencies, which reached 10 until 15 billion rupiah each month. So who contributing the remittance? Also in Jember and Banyuwangi regencies in East Java, Jember regencies has set the local regulation actually concerning on migrant protection since 2008, but the regulation lead to the same paradigm, more placement, less protection. Meanwhile, in Banyuwangi does not make any regulation regarding such protection. This is the element of DESBUMI. They have data collection, document service, information service about safe migration, complaint mechanism, communication access, also political budget, organizing migrant workers there, former of migrant workers, family of migrant workers, remittance management education, paralegal education, also rating the recruitment agencies, referral system, minimum service standard, mutual agreement, and of course, the village regulation on the protection of migrant workers as an umbrella. In 2004 until 2014, we have a pilot project in 18 villages, and now become 47 DESBUMI in NTB, East Java, Central Java, and NTT. We can see the progress, how DESBUMI helping more to providing pre-departure and cash handling services, conducting economic empowerment program for returnee migrant workers, organizing village budget for protection migrant workers, setting the village regulation into 38 village, and 41 group of migrant workers organized there who are actively involved in advocacy and empowerment program for their community with estimated 1,677 members, and actively do advocacy in the village and regency level. The other thing also, the civil society organization, Network for Migrant Workers Advocacy, have a common agenda and become more consolidative, their vision of law, anti-trafficking, cash handling, and so on. Of course, there are a positive impact of this pilot, DESBUMI, avoiding the accumulation of migrant workers in some shelter in Jakarta and major cities. The placement of migrant workers overseas is more transparent. The family of migrant workers and public will know and control the migration process. Narrowing documents forgery, shifting the role of broker in migrant workers placement. Central and local government have the database on their citizens who are working abroad. Renewing the bureaucracy, this is very important. Facilitating migrant workers placement control, and I think reducing the cost structure, because for middlemen, migrant workers have to pay 7 million rupiah every people. And the last one, we hope that this initiative should restoring the rights of migrant workers from village, how to toward how to reject the private agency hegemony, and initially built to protect migrant workers since their departure until they return home, and also encourage the active role of local government in establishing migrant policy. And with DESBUMI, we hope migrant workers are expected to be more prosperous, as government has never seriously realized their prosperity so far. So we hope this part of the presence of the state that representative by village government. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope we can continue in discussing.
Thank you, Anise. After all the lamenting about regional autonomy and decentralisation yesterday, that seems to be a sort of a positive story about decentralisation, which is very good. And so now, for another dimension on the human face of globalisation, we've got human trafficking. Elle, can you please speak?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for Indonesian project in ANU for giving me the chance to speak about human trafficking issue. I'm sorry for taking your time for talking about this issue on Saturday morning, during the weekend when your mind usually rests on the days. However, this is a very important issue, which could be used as the entry point to evaluate the implementation of government program, and also to check how the state functions from its center to area to its margin. I myself, I should say that I was also a migrant worker. I spent 4 years in England as a PhD student, and I found myself for a living working under NHS for 4 years in Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham. So I'm the one against the Tory government for attacking this project. By the way, I'm going to talk about why Indonesian government fails to address the issue of human trafficking in its home country. And perhaps I will also add how Australian government can help. Maybe. The question is when the state fails to protect its citizens, and when the rule of law is an empty concept for its most vulnerable citizens, what should be done? That's the question. It's true, it's not only about an objective analysis. It's not about the knowledge of, but this is the question of knowledge for. How we can change it? What motivates this research? Could you help me? This is the video about the story in February 2014. I will play only for 1.5 minutes, so you see the background. In a week, 2 girls from Timor Tengah Selatan were sent back to Kupang in coffin, in different days. Their death gives a shock to the community. They come from the same village in the Tetes district, the district in central Timor, and work in bird nest industry. All of the labor come from entity for this small scale industry come from Timor.
Orang tua tidak tahu Rista kemana. Dia pergi dengan satu harapan, bekerja keras, berhasil dan membawa pulang uang, membahagiakan bapak dan mama. Kebanyakan gadis yang pergi juga bermimpi seperti itu.
The leader who speaks here now, she is elected as the head of the evangelical church in Timor, as quite an influential person now. She lead the anti-trafficking movement, which I involved as well.
Meminta keadilan Tuhan bagi Rista dan juga mengadukan kelambatan penanganan terhadap pengaduan iri yang menyebabkan Rista dan Marni meninggal dunia serta belasan kawan lain yang dirawat di beberapa rumah sakit.
I should stop in that. They work in bird nest industry, or you can call it Yanwo in Mandarin language. This is a special delicacy in Chinese restaurant. It used to be a part of the food for the royalty, but it could be afforded by the new class. It is considered as seafood since the bird nest is located in most of the coastal area, mostly in Southeast Asia. The central production is based in Medan, North Sumatra, but its center for marketing located in Hong Kong, for different Chinese restaurants around the world. They were promised about good life, about good working condition, but they were caged, literally caged, for 2 to 4 years and forced to work in very poor working condition. They were malnutrition. Some of them were paralyzed, and when the police brings them out to hospital. Unfortunately, there's no police report until today. I've given all the narrative document to the Indonesian president in 2016 by myself in the palace when invited as the talk show. Similar type of slavery is also published by Tempo magazine in March this year. But the location not in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in the capital, in Kuala Lumpur. The women who work in the bird nest industry, they not come from Timor in Kuala Lumpur, but they come from Semarang, Central Java. I will show you a little bit about the map of Indonesia, and also the square one is where I come from. I come from Kupang. This is an abandoned area for a very long time by the Indonesian government. The Dutch used this as an area as its outer post, where its tradition of raising flag ceremony remain as its legacy for our bureaucrats. Not the program, not the implementation program, the raising flag. For Australian, this place is known for the barrier zone. In World War II, it was the barrier zone to hold the advance of Japanese troops. And today, it's the place of the barrier zone from the people smuggling to Australia. The detention center is placed in Kupang as well. This is we try to, okay, this is the map. So basically, one of the reasons why the research is done is to give evidence to the policymakers that human trafficking is not only about one case, single case, but it's a social pattern which needs special attention. You can look that we quote the news from the different local newspaper in the last 3 years and analyze it. Here we can see the largest number of human trafficking come from Timor, Sumba, and Flores. Further research is needed to understand the concept of the vulnerability in this area and its relation to risk migration. You can see Lembata only have one, maybe because of the ANIS program in that area. Lembata on the top. Flores also 180. So this is the number of the human trafficking we got. So let's go to the category of traffickers. We code who are the perpetrators, who are the traffickers. This is the labor agency, the highest one. Here we can see the main perpetrator of human trafficking come from labor agency. The second main perpetrator is unidentified by the police. That's the early signal of the corruption. The third perpetrators come from individuals. These individuals should be seen as a part of global network. And then human trafficking and development. NTT is underdeveloped. The pacification we start in 1904, even earlier in Manggarai, west of Flores. And then I would like to take San, I think you can read by yourself. I want to stress on here I agree that market is really important. But I do not see a feasible outcome without including the social support, public regulation, and also statecraft to protect the most vulnerable population. Mas Bayu, could you help? So here I want to show that human trafficking and children. Human Development Index in NTT province is the third from the bottom, just after Papua Barat and Papua. This is a picture in 2004 when I was a journalist. The children. This is a labor agency.
Karena itu yang merugikan kita kan tercapai. Dari lapangan ini yang berarti kita seleksi lagi. Jadi Pak Ron saya begini, ini bagaimana datang ke Polda? Apa tidak ada koordinasi juga dari Pak punya koordinator di sana bahwa anak-anak akan diberangkat?
So most of NTT children drop out on the 7th grade. The lowest in Central Sumber District drop out on the 5th grade in primary school. The condition of education is very poor. The teacher payment, the salary, you can say the 500,000 rupees per month. Mostly late, they pay once or twice in a year. So after 6 months, they get paid. So Jokowi presidents should focus on the issue of education. One of the key issues, I think. In the last 3 years, literally, there are 218 children sold from NTT. As we quote only from the newspaper, only from the newspaper. So it's important to look on the impact of connectivity on unequal development among regions or within population in each province in Indonesia as a micro study. For instance, the building of new road cuts the existence of middlemen in terms of the value chain analysis. There's no survey yet about the job loss as the impact of the new infrastructure. The irony is that when the new road is coming and there's no commodity to be transported, human being is treated as the commodity to be sold. Yes, human trafficking is the indicator of the long-term existence of the social exclusion. We need to learn about the new order strategy of development and look the way it abandoned the area and also other area. For us, in the margin, Jokowi's government does make change. If people from Jakarta say about the economic slowing down, I would like to say that it's not about slowing down, but it's about the sharing economy. Further research on the economic development among provinces in Indonesia needs to be done to support this claim. So this is the network of human trafficking. This is using social network analysis. You can see the light green color dot is the color of the district from the entity province. The dark green is the exit gate from entity province. You can see from Kupang, the biggest one, Sika, Manggarai Barat, and Sumba Barat Daya. And you can see also the gray color dots, the transit area. Pontianak, Makassar, Jambi, Pangkal Pinang, Riau, Palembang, Sape, for instance. The red blue color dots is the destination for foreign country, Malaysia, one of the biggest one. And the light blue color dots is for the palm plantation. So those KKK, the palm plantation not only based in Kuala Lumpur, but they also expand the area in Central Kalimantan, West Kalimantan. They are not only access the resources, but access for the very, very cheap labor. And you can also see the yellow one, it's also about the dots for the domestic workers, this transit area, but also destination. But apart from this, this diagram, I want to say that most of provinces in Indonesia have problem of human trafficking, not only in our province. I think the Ministry of Social Welfare have the data. At very least, they have returned 20,000 people as victims of human trafficking last year. So I want to say that this is why do we fail. Mbak Anies already explained about corruption, conflict of interest. So conflict of interest, we can mention that many former generals, police generals are the directors of labor agencies. And part of the problem, it must be difficult for the younger police to check their former boss. And then there's no single institution in Indonesia which actively leads the anti-trafficking effort. You can mention that. Currently, we have the National Task Force, but rather than function as the task force to respond to the extraordinary crime, it functions as the coordination forum. And it's led by the non-department Ministry of Women Empowerment and Children Protection. We have no data on that. And I think rather than this metric on bureaucracy deadlock, so the complexity, I think. Again, explained by itself, the PowerPoint. Citizenship and commodification, right and objectification. That's not only about right to migration. It's impossible to have right when you are treated as a commodity. And I think the horizontal comprehensive is the challenge, not only about the Ummah, also about the class, I think. So what can be done? I think that this is for the policymakers. Developing a better strategy of development by aware of the inequality. I think producing general assessment on human trafficking within Indonesia is important. Do you think that it's possible to force the other government, the other foreign countries to protect our citizens if Indonesia itself, we abandon them? Impossible. And the Indonesian government needs to control the labor agencies. More than 50% of the perpetrators that I have shown are labor agencies and companies. There should be a serious study on human trafficking in Indonesia. There should be a national database on human trafficking so we can ban easily the companies. Because it's very easy, thank you. And because it's very easy to replace the new company with the new one by changing the name to the other family members. I find out that. And then I think what can be done by Australia? That's one of the things that I will suggest. Giving scholarship to the farmers in Timor, for instance. The climate and land condition between Timor and Australia is closer compared to Java. The agricultural strategy should be different between Java and Timor and other islands. Maybe rather than promoting paddy and sawah, it's better to promote wheat plantation, for instance. visiting the Australian National Museum 2 days ago, just around here. I think we need to learn from Australia experience 200 years ago, when different agricultural and farming methods employed by the farmers here after reading the landscape. And then, what can be done when the state fails to act? This definition of state here follows the liberal definition, which is about the multiple network of institutions. Sovereignty according to human trafficking victims and targets. Taking the position from the margin, from Kupang, I think that we try to give them the name, not number. We challenge the state institution which act as a predatory state institutions by finding the social change agent within state institution and work with them. We find a whistleblower in 2016, I think, from the Police institution, and it's helped a lot and bring this issue to the national level. But unfortunately, we still need a lot of work to push this forward. And the church also, the role of the church is very important. As I mentioned, the church has been functioned as the protection of the people. I believe the issue of the sovereignty is not only for the citizens, but also for academia, I think. Academia is not only about the impact factor in journals. You need to make impact in for the society. Sometimes the politics of grant may bother you, but we need to create certain space to give the right question, which is mostly needed by our society. This research is done in the last 3 years by volunteers of researchers and sometimes without payment. We pay as long as we have research. And sometimes we become street food seller. This is we call it RGC, the social change. We try to make a social change. So scholarship is about making and involving social change. I believe so. I also believe that Academia Hub is the best place to develop universal humanity. I think that's enough for the presentation. How many minutes I have?
A minute. Yeah. Have another minute.
Okay, I will add something because I still have something to add something.
You have the floor, so take advantage of it.
Okay. Heavy market penetration has influenced Indonesian labor law, which is insensitive to labor exploitation. And this is one of the cases. Lida Bunu is a female, 36, Indonesian citizen, come from Sumba, central Sumba, Sumba Barat, west of Sumba. I, with my friend, myself, with my friend, we found this abandoned coffin in the cargo area in the airport. It has been abandoned for 3 days in February 2017. He died in Penang, in Malaysia. So this issue is a very serious issue, and we need to make something. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, El. That's really amazing work that you're doing once again at the grassroots level. It's really amazing thing to hear about. So we have about 15 minutes, I think, for questions. We'll take them in groups of 2 or 3 again, or there's plenty now, I see. Okay, well, perhaps we should just start. I'm sorry. We should just start over here, perhaps with 2 people on this side, and then someone right up the back here, perhaps.
Thank you very much. Titik Anas, Presisi Indonesia. Question for Al. Is there any differences in the governance quality in desa around Nusa Tenggara that show differences in desa helping to prevent the human trafficking? Thank you.
And there's another question here, I think.
So, Yeah, my name is Hippo. I'm from ANU also. I think my point here should be addressed by Edward Aspinall. I hope that Ed is still in the room, but I can't see him. But anyway, my concern, my primary concern is about when he coined the term of new mode of nationalisms yesterday. I mean, in Indonesia, honestly speaking, we don't speak the same mood of nationalisms. For instance, like what Mbak Arif and then KL were speaking about, that's different kind of nationalisms for many Indonesians. If you go to West Papua, the one that I conducted my fieldwork last year, they spoke different language of nationalisms for Indonesia. So I think when we try, Ed might be the expert of speaking about this issue, but I think when we define about nationalism, this will be different. And then my question for Kyle is that is there any political complication in terms of how the role of local parliamentarians in Kupang? Because we know we are coming from the same city, Sir Hometown in Kupang. So I just wonder, because I haven't followed any news about the role of parliamentarians, local member of parliaments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we had one up the back, I think that's right. Yes.
Pak El and Mbak Anis, thanks for the presentations. I enjoyed it. Irwan Sinaga is my name. Although you are very modest in giving examples, it's far more than worse than that. But it's an interesting presentation. Unfortunately, you focus heavily on the supply side. We need to talk on the demand side. Can we solve this trafficking persons problem if demand is still there? If we're talking about trafficking persons, especially in women, of women and children, we talk about sources countries, transits countries, destinations countries. Okay, it's still there, but it's heavily on supply side. Indonesian government and everything, states, things like that. But we need to focus on the demand side. Can we solve this problem without talking about demand? If demand is still there, this problem cannot be solved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Okay, so we have, I think, different approaches at different areas, and sort of the question about nationalism and the attitude of people in Kupang, and then trying to do something about the demand side rather than the supply side. So, Anis?
Thank you for the response. It's working? No. Yes. Yeah, thank you, Mas Irwan. The demand side, talking on migration, it's really not enough with the approach pull and push factor. As I mentioned it before, the migration in Indonesia actually is the feminization of migration, the feminization of poverty. Yes, there are demand from many outside, several countries. But what we have in our basis, our legal framework, our policies, our effort to eradicate the poverty in Indonesia, to ensuring the rights of women in Indonesia, it's also the important thing, how migrate abroad actually have to be an option, not force. Until now, being migrate abroad is still forced for many women in Indonesia. I working in several villages around Indonesia, where is the basis of migrant workers. It's really, in my eyes, how they difficult even to think what the kind of food tomorrow for the table. how to continue their children for the school, and how they face the violence, domestic violence inside house. So it's really important for Indonesia to reflect how to have the commitment, the political commitment. Yes, we need the diplomacy, we need the foreign policy, how to ensuring the receiving countries, there are so many demands from outside, to also have the commitment. But basically, Indonesian migrant workers, and especially women migrant workers, having in abusive condition even before migrate abroad. So that's my concern. And as you know, until now, Indonesian government also has not the national legislation how to protect migrant domestic in the national level. We already have the draft of bill since 2004, so 13 years already. But as always, only being the national priority agenda in our parliament, but never in discussing, because it's still the commitment. And we also have the problem regarding with the coordination in our body on migrant workers, on migrant thing. There are around 24 ministry. We can imagine how to coordinate, how to manage the synergy. It's quite difficult for us. So yes, of course, we more discussing in the supply side because we can do more in Indonesia, but still few.
Okay, maybe. Did you want to address another question, or maybe Els? We had that question particularly about attitudes of people in the politicians in Kupang versus the centre, I think. And
So yeah, thank you. Point one about the supply and demand side. It is very expensive. I don't think it's possible to control the demand side. I don't think so. And then what we try to do now is we control from our homeland, from our village. It's cheaper. And then we cannot afford to control the demand side. Although that's, I think I agree with we can boycott the product and things like that. I agree with that. If only this campaign become bigger and bigger in Indonesia. And about the local parliamentary role, I think this problem is beyond the local level, the local capacity. So as Bani already mentioned about the 24 institutions involved in about the labor problem, with the graphic which is given by Raden Pardede yesterday, you can feel the deadlock. And about Mbak Titi Anis, about the desa policy in NTT province, I want to be optimist, but I could not. I cannot, actually. It needs further introduction, and the conflict between the two ministries, Minister of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Village, something, Kementerian Desa, should be solved first. And the political parties' interest in this project should be clear first, because they use this budget to employ their cadres, actually. Thank you.
okay, we have some more over here, and maybe way up the back here on this side, and then is there someone over here, or there's perhaps down here in the centre?
Okay.
Okay.
Is it working? Yeah. Now, David Mitchell from Monash University and also from West Sumba. I just want to mention a friend of mine who came back from her own experience with doing domestic work in Malaysia and had to find her own answers to Elcid's question of what can be done. So she did three things. One was that she focused on sending off all of the young people in her extended family to study in Indonesia or in Kupang rather than going off as TKI. Secondly, she sent her husband, instead of going herself, to work on a rubber plantation in Malaysia, but kept in touch with him regularly every week by HP and monitored the money being sent back all the time. Thirdly, very important, that monitoring, and thirdly, to supplement the money she was getting from her husband, which had to keep the family going, she also managed to recruit her friends in Australia to send up what's really a tiny amount of money to use for the scholarships for the girls and boys going off to school. So you might like to comment on that.
Okay, but it's also interesting information maybe as well. So, Ambassador, do you have the Ambassador has a question.
Thank you so much. My name is Cristiano Legowo. Well, it's very sad, everything that you mentioned. I think there are a lot of things that we have to address. And about the about the conduct, about the place of protecting Indonesian migrant workers in our foreign policy, I thank you so much also for highlighting one single issue that you used to judge the priority that we give in the conduct of our foreign policy. And I would like to apologize also to you that we are not doing well enough when we are saving some of our migrants in the Middle East, when we evacuated also our citizens in Yemen, and for that I would like to apologize if we did not do enough. And just one more thing, the fact that until now, in your opinion, we could not stop this. So there must be a pulling factor that we really have to address. And one of the pulling factor that exists, in my opinion, there are a lot of people also who have a success story. I mean, if the story is always, if you go to Malaysia, if you go to Middle East, what you're gonna experience is just to experience abuses. I think no one, no matter how big the temptations, the lure, I think people will not go there. So, did you ever?
We're running very short of time.
Yes. Did you ever make a survey also, a comparison between those who have a success story and those also who always experience a lot of hardship? So we could put the issue also in perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Look, I'm sorry, we're really running up against 10 o'clock, so if you could briefly address those two questions. Sorry about those other people who are on the
I just have a quick comment. My name is Sade Bimantara. One quick comment and one question. I must disagree with
very quickly because we're right up on 10 o'clock.
That you said the state fails to act. Yes, some of the problems have not been addressed, but I think many things have been done, and I just would like to pick up the point that Irwan mentioned earlier about the demand side. The demand side that I think the government is trying to solve is to create domestic demand in Indonesia itself, economic growth, which will pull in and create jobs in Indonesia. And then the second thing is that I think the government is phasing out the export of migrant workers. Moratorium in the Middle East, for example, is one, and enforcing and negotiating the high standards between Indonesia and other countries like Malaysia.
Thank you. We really need to just try and address these questions very, very quickly if you can, because we're right on deadline.
Thank you, Pak David, for the suggestion. Pak Ambassador, yes, we did the comparison studies about what happened with migrant workers. I think DESBUMI also part of our effort how to take a picture, another picture of migrant workers, not only in abusive, but we not ignore the role of the embassies around the world, Indonesian embassies, I mean. But in our perspective, it's still ad hoc, case-by-case approach, because we need how to solve this problem systematically from our country, how to ensuring the safe migration process, starting from the recruitment process. So why we do from the village level.
Okay,
And the moratorium, I think, based on our survey of migrant care, we have tests in the airport. There are still going 2,644 Indonesian migrant workers still going to Saudi using the Umrah visa, because there are moratorium only on the paper, no control from the government.
Okay, thank you. Now, El, do you feel you need to answer one of these?
Yeah, just about the role of the foreign ministry, as Pak Dominggus mentioned. I think that's bright pictures. I choose deliberately to bring the opposite one, because I think that if we focus on those vulnerable persons, not by case, but if we can lift them up, it means that we do the structural change. That's my argument. And then, as the Pak David Mitchell, I need to introduce you to Pak David Mitchell. He was the head of the health office.
I think we really need to wind up very fast.
1 minute.
Sorry.
The head of the health office in Sumba. So, the only Australian ever been like that.
Okay. Okay, sure. Thank you.
And I think if I can say that, if I can talk to Pak Suharto in 1980s, I will say to Pak Harto, do not send the maid to Middle East. Do not send them, because that's wrong. It's a mistake. While you can figure out the ILO documents, while the Thailand, while the Philippines, sending the semi-skilled worker, we go for the housemaid. Why? It's impossible to protect them. You can see the figures.
Okay, thank you very
Sorry,
much.
just clarify.
And
Since 2011, ILO actually adopted the ILO Convention 189 on decent work for domestic workers. So it's actually our homework how to adopt this convention to protect our citizens that working as domestic workers.
okay, thank you very much.
It's
Annie, and